Think about this. For millennia, people have journeyed to natural springs, convinced of the water's power to heal. It's a story as old as time, really.
It is. But now, while, our ancestors relied on belief, modern science is diving deep, trying to understand exactly what's going on inside us when we drink mineral water.
Right. So this deep dive, we're unpacking the biochemical effects, the health implications, all based on scientific research.
Exactly. We've looked at quite a range of studies, focusing on the biochemical analyses in animal models and, importantly, in human trials, too.
So our mission today is, well, it's pretty clear.
Mhm.
Pull out the crucial insights from all this science. How does drinking mineral water actually affect our bodies, at that fundamental level? And just as important, where are the gaps? Where do scientists still need to dig deeper?
It's quite telling, I think, that the European Community Directives already recognize that some mineral waters have, well, conservation and even healing properties.
Really, based on what?
Well, this recognition often comes from clinical and pharmacological studies done within member states. They acknowledge specific waters as potential sources of essential micronutrients, like calcium, for instance.
But there's a bit of a counterpoint from the World Health Organization, isn't there?
Indeed there is. The WHO, they take a more cautious stance in their guidelines for drinking water quality.
Yeah.
They don't currently set minimum recommendations for these essential compounds in mineral water. They basically say there's a need for more robust evidence, to definitively back up widespread health claims.
Okay, so this idea that water does more than just hydrate. It's been around forever, not some new trend.
Oh, far from it. The therapeutic use of thermal waters, certainly in the Mediterranean, goes back to the 2nd century BC.
Wow.
And what's really striking is the huge surge in consumption of natural mineral water recently. Just look in any supermarket right now.
Yeah, the shelves are packed.
Exactly. It highlights this growing fascination. And traditionally, especially think Eastern European spas, these waters weren't just for drinking casually. They were prescribed for specific health benefits.
And not just for minor things, right? The claims covered a pretty wide range.
Absolutely. The historical literature talks about uses for, well, all sorts of conditions. Respiratory issues, skin problems, liver, intestines, gynecological stuff, even the osteoarticular system.
Bones and joints, basically.
Right. Bones and joints. And of course, let's not forget, just drinking enough water in general is fundamental for good digestion and gut health.
Now, let's get into some specifics. I thought the part about mineral water's effects on our digestive system was particularly interesting.
Yeah, what's intriguing there is the evidence suggesting that carbonated mineral waters, the fizzy ones, can act as a sort of gentle stimulus for the digestive tract.
How so?
Well, some studies indicate potential benefits for things like functional dyspepsia. That's that ongoing discomfort after eating, irritable bowel syndrome, and even some functional issues with the biliary tract. That involves the gallbladder and bile ducts. The bubbles seem to help get things moving, stimulate secretions.
So it's not just the fizz doing the work. Sounds like the salts play a part too.
Precisely. Research indicates that mineral waters rich in salts can actually help the body convert cholesterol into bile acids, which are then eliminated. So think of it like the salt helps your body get rid of cholesterol more efficiently through digestion. And this might be part of how some waters have those broader health effects we'll talk about.
Speaking of broader effects, the source material mentions antioxidant and cholesterol-lowering properties in some spring waters. That sounds like a pretty big deal.
It is, potentially. Studies, mostly in animal models like rabbits and rats so far, have shown certain spring waters, particularly those rich in sulfur, or a mix of magnesium, sulfate, and sulfur, show both antioxidant activity.
Protecting cells from damage.
Right. And also what's called hypocholesterolemic activity, basically lowering cholesterol levels. So these findings hint at a possible protective effect against damage to fats in our blood.
And calcium. We hear so much about calcium. Can we really get a meaningful amount from water?
Yes, mineral water that contains calcium can definitely increase blood calcium levels. It can also influence parathyroid hormone secretion, which regulates calcium.
But it varies.
It does vary, yeah. The impact depends quite a bit on the overall mineral mix of that specific water.
Which brings us to the connection between minerals in water and cardiovascular disease, heart disease, stroke. A major concern for lots of people.
It's a really important question. And over the last decade or so, epidemiological studies have looked at this. They compare mineral content in drinking water across different countries with death rates from cardiovascular disease.
And what have they found? Any links?
Some studies have found geographical connections, for example, linking higher stroke mortality with more acidic river water in certain areas, but honestly, it's a complex picture. The findings aren't always consistent.
Right. Correlation isn't causation.
Exactly. It tells us we need to be careful about drawing really firm conclusions just yet. We need more detailed work to understand these links properly.
That's a good point. Now, while we're talking benefits, the article also mentions adverse events during some health resort treatments. We should probably touch on that too.
Absolutely. It's important to acknowledge some people undergoing these cures have reported general issues like asthenia, that's a feeling of weakness, lack of energy and malaise, just feeling generally unwell, some neurological symptoms too.
And do they know why? Is it linked to the water?
Well, interestingly, these events haven't really been studied in depth, specifically in relation to the biochemical activity of the mineral waters themselves, which, just underscores the need for more research. We need to understand if and how certain waters might cause unintended side effects in some individuals.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of potential effects. Now, the article gets pretty detailed about classifying mineral waters. It sounds like it's way more than just sparkling or still.
Oh, you're exactly right. The classification is quite sophisticated, actually. Scientists use various criteria, chemical and physical properties, think temperature, acidity,
Okay.
detailed chemical analyses, looking at the residue left after evaporation, dissolved gases, even general things like color and taste. A key method is based on the total dissolved salts or the dry residue per liter.
And there's a specific Italian system mentioned.
Yes, the Marotta and Sicca classification from 1933. It's still widely used, and it's specifically linked to whether the waters are authorized for drinking, for oral use.
Wow. Yeah.
Beyond that, waters are also grouped by their main ions, the electrically charged particles dissolved in them.
Like bicarbonate, sulfate, sodium chloride, salt.
Exactly. And this ion mix leads to different types of mineral water, each with its own unique profile and potential effects. For instance, you have oligomineral and low mineralized waters.
Meaning low minerals.
Yep. Low mineral content. They usually flow fast, don't spend much time dissolving rocks. They tend to be hypotonic, lower concentration than our body fluids, and can be diuretic, make you pee more.
Uh-huh.
Interestingly, some can even have natural radioactivity, which some believe contributes to their therapeutic effects.
Then there's sulfurous water. The one with that distinct smell, right? Like
Yeah.
rotten eggs.
That's the one. That smells from hydrogen sulfide, H2S. You need at least 1 milligram per liter. How the H2S behaves depends on the water's pH, its acidity.
Right.
And when it's bottled, some of those gases can escape. Sulfurous waters are pretty well known for their effects on skin, mucous membranes, respiratory, vaginal, and the digestive system.
What about salt bromine iodine water?
Yeah.
Sounds like it comes from the sea.
Typically, yes, seawater sources.
Mm-hmm.
Rich in sodium chloride, common salt again, but also iodine and bromine. They're known for anti-inflammatory properties used for various gut issues,
Okay.
and their concentration varies. They can be hypotonic, isotonic like body fluids, or hypertonic, more concentrated.
The article also mentions radioactive water. That sounds a bit worrying.
It can sound alarming, sure, but the radioactivity is from naturally occurring elements like radon, radium, uranium. Radon is the main one used therapeutically.
How does that work?
It's absorbed quickly and also eliminated fairly fast. The effects are thought to come from the alpha radiation it gives off. They're used for things like joint diseases, gout. There are even observed effects on the nervous system, gynecological functions, the immune system, and they're classified by their radioactivity levels.
Then we have salt water. Pretty straightforward.
High in sodium and chloride, yeah. Often sulfate, too. If they also have bicarbonate or iodine, they can be used in hydropenic therapy, basically, drinking cures, especially for gastrointestinal diseases. Their temperature varies, too, which affects their biological impact.
Okay. And sulfate water. The key is sulfate ions.
Exactly. Often with bicarbonate, calcium, magnesium mixed in. There are subtypes depending on what else is present in significant amounts, traditionally used for liver, kidney, digestive, and respiratory problems.
Carbonic water, the fizzy kind we talked about earlier.
Yes, high in bicarbonate. Often forms in calcium-rich soil where water reacts with CO2, used for heart, circulation, and respiratory conditions. They're also classified by how much free CO2 they have and their specific therapeutic uses.
And lastly, ferrous arsenic water. That combination sounds potentially tricky.
Well, it's a classification because iron and arsenic often show up together naturally in some waters. Two main types. One is sulfate ferrous ferric, tends to be arsenic-rich, low pH.
Okay.
The other is bicarbonate ferrous, less arsenic, but less stable. Now, high arsenic can signal contamination, definitely, but the bicarbonate ferrous type does have known hemopoietic properties, helps build blood cells.
Wow, okay, so mineral water is clearly a huge umbrella term for many different things. Now let's dive into the actual therapeutic effects scientists have seen.
Right, so based on their biological activity, you can generally describe mineral waters as having diuretic effects increasing urination,
Mm.
cathartic effects acting as a laxative, and antiphlogistic effects reducing inflammation. And there are numerous studies, clinical ones, population-based ones, looking at outcomes of using these therapies for various health issues.
What about things like blood pressure and how our bodies handle energy, especially as we get older?
Yeah, some studies looked at mineral water rich in sodium chloride in older adults. They found it could actually counteract the blood pressure drop you often see when someone cuts down on salt.
Oh, that's interesting. Kind of counterintuitive, given the advice to cut salt.
It is something to consider. On the flip side, water rich in sodium bicarbonate might help maintain calcium balance on a low-salt diet. But it's also important to note higher sodium in drinking water has been linked to increased blood pressure in kids, even newborns. So you need to be careful about sodium content in water used for infant formula, for example.
Okay. What about cholesterol management and cardiovascular health?
Using certain mineral waters in drinking therapy has shown some promise there. For instance, spring water, high in sulfate and alkaline minerals, seems to lower elevated cholesterol and other blood fats by affecting lipoprotein metabolism.
And that Montecatini water you mentioned.
Right, studies on that Italian water suggest its high salt content can lower total and LDL cholesterol, the bad kind, by increasing how much bile acid sterols we excrete.
And it's not just internal effects, is it? Benefits for the respiratory system, too.
Correct. Sulfurous waters that also have arsenic and iron have shown positive effects for inflammation in the upper airways, helping improve nasal airflow, mucus movement, which clears the airways.
Right, important for clearing things out.
Exactly. And there's evidence of improvements in immune markers in the nasal lining, too.
Sounds like they can also help with digestive issues.
Yes, mineral water therapy has been effective for problems with secretion and movement in the biliary tract gallbladder, bile ducts leading to faster functional recovery.
Huh.
Plus, waters with calcium and that magnesium sulfate-sulfur combo are used in aerosols for chronic upper respiratory inflammation. And also in therapeutic baths, balneotherapy for rheumatic conditions and skin problems like psoriasis, eczema, thanks to the sulfur's anti-inflammatory and skin effects.
The magnesium link to heart health comes up a lot. What's the research say?
Well, several studies have suggested a possible inverse relationship between magnesium levels in drinking water and dying from ischemic heart disease, or IHD.
Meaning more magnesium, lower risk.
Potentially, yes. Areas with more magnesium in the water might have lower rates of this heart disease, but again, the findings haven't been totally consistent across all studies.
And calcium, again, how does that relate to heart disease and kidney stones?
It's complex. Some studies hint at an inverse link between water calcium and IHD, but others don't find it. For kidney stones, especially calcium oxalate ones, the usual advice for people prone to them is actually to drink water with relatively low calcium,
Really? Why is that?
while still getting enough calcium from their diet. The idea is that dietary calcium helps manage oxalate absorption in the gut, but high calcium in water might not be ideal for preventing recurrence in susceptible people.
Okay, that really shows how complex these mineral interactions are. Let's zoom in now on the specific biochemical effects scientists have observed, the nitty-gritty.
Right. And it's worth saying, again, the number of studies looking specifically at the biochemical mechanisms is still relatively limited compared to, say, clinical outcome studies. But the ones we have offer valuable clues about what's happening at a molecular level.
Like the study on water with calcium and that magnesium sulfate-sulfur mix as a potential cholesterol alternative.
Exactly. Studies on rats fed a high cholesterol diet showed this type of water could reduce total cholesterol in red blood cell membranes, and also lower LDL levels, the bad cholesterol. So it suggests a possible non-drug approach.
And the research on carbonated mineral water. The effects on cardiovascular risk factors in postmenopausal women seemed quite significant.
Yes, that study was interesting. It found that when these women drank mineral water rich in sodium, bicarbonate, and chloride, they saw reductions in several CVD risk factors and in fasting blood sugar.
Okay.
It also positively affected markers of endothelial dysfunction that's key in atherosclerosis development. So it points towards a potential role in preventing heart disease and metabolic syndrome.
We also talked about sodium earlier. The source material seems to have some nuanced takes on sodium intake and cholesterol.
It does. Some research hints that a very low-salt diet might, paradoxically, cause total and LDL cholesterol to increase in some people.
Ah,
Conversely, sometimes increasing salt intake might have a cholesterol-lowering effect. The carbonated water study, where people were generally low salt but still saw cholesterol drop, suggests the water's alkalinity and osmotic effects might influence cholesterol absorption or elimination, separate from just the sodium.
and the idea for how carbonated water lowers cholesterol involves bile acids, doesn't it?
That's the leading hypothesis, yes. Drinking it likely boosts the conversion of cholesterol to bile acids and then helps the body eliminate those bile acids in waste.
Okay.
This fits with findings showing increased bile acid excretion in feces and reduced gallbladder volume in people drinking salt-rich mineral waters.
There was also that specific San Giovanni water mentioned.
Yes, studies on that spring water, rich in calcium and the magnesium sulfate-sulfur combo, indicated it lowers total and LDL cholesterol by interfering with the enterohepatic cycle of bile acids.
The body's recycling system for them.
Exactly. This water seems to interrupt that recycling, meaning more bile acids and thus more cholesterol get eliminated. It adds weight to the idea that drinking specific mineral waters could be a therapeutic approach for managing cholesterol, maybe alongside or even as an alternative to medication in some cases.
And finally, the article gets into antioxidant properties of sulfurous water and some really specific biochemical effects.
Yes, our own previous research showed sulfurous mineral water does have antioxidant properties, which can benefit liver and red blood cell metabolism. But we also found it might interfere with a key enzyme in glucose metabolism called GAPDH, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase.
Wow.
Potentially by reducing the availability of a molecule called NAD plus H. And this seemed linked to unstable hemoglobin and maybe inhibition of both GAPDH and another enzyme, G6-PDH glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase.
And these enzyme effects might explain some of those side effects people reported, like feeling weak or headaches.
That's the connection we proposed, yes. Decreased activity of GAPDH and G6-PDH could lead to higher levels of methemoglobin in the blood. Methemoglobin doesn't carry oxygen well.
Ah, okay.
And that could potentially contribute to symptoms like fatigue, asthenia, and headaches, sulfalgia, seen in some people during sulfurous water cures. This actually led us to suggest using a test, an assay for GAPDH activity as a way to monitor the risk of these adverse events.
Okay, wow. We have really taken a deep dive into the science here. If you had to boil it down, what are the main things we should take away?
I think the key takeaway is that mineral waters are incredibly complex mixtures. Their mineral compositions vary hugely, and there is growing scientific evidence suggesting they can have real, measurable effects on our health.
Uh,
But it's also very clear we need much more rigorous biochemical research. We need to fully understand how they work and figure out which types might be best for specific conditions and for different groups of people.
And these potential therapeutic effects, they really seem tied to that unique blend of minerals the water picks up from its environment, right? It's not the same as just drinking tap water, even if tap water has some minerals.
Precisely. The specific mineral salts, how they interact, that's what potentially gives these waters their healing properties. It's crucial we keep investigating both the benefits and any potential downsides of different kinds of mineral waters.
So, thinking about this long history of use, side by side with this emerging science, it really makes you think about the future, doesn't it? What role could scientifically validated mineral water therapies play in health and wellness down the road? And maybe more personally, what specific questions about mineral water and your own health are now top of mind after hearing all this? It's certainly given me a lot to chew on.